I'm Dr. Brian Nickel, your cannabis expert for CannabisExpertMD.com. I have the pleasure of being at Pure Pharma Labs today, where I'm speaking with Chris Gibson. Pure Pharma Labs is a Central Arkansas hemp extraction company that has been processing hemp for the industry, as well as producing their own quality line of CBD products since 2020. Chris, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for having us out here today.
It's my pleasure, Doc. Thanks for being here.
I know we've spoken before, and we are both very much entourage effect guys and very excited about the entire cannabis and hemp industry in the state. Chris, I know you have extensive experience in the industry. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Well, academically, pardon me, academically, I have a Bachelor of Science in Horticulture from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. And my love of cannabis is much older than my college degree. I think I first planted a cannabis seed in 1983 in Saline County on the Middle Fork of the Saline River bottoms. And I've really been a fanatic for this plant ever since. Okay, so actually I got a degree in horticulture knowing that this is what I wanted to do as far as a career goes. I wanted to cultivate or process. And so about 10 years after I graduated from high school in Central Arkansas, I managed to finish a degree in horticulture from the University of Arkansas. It was a very circuitous path. But subsequently, I worked as an inspector of organic farms before the USDA had jurisdiction over organics. And so as a process inspector and a farm inspector, I had really fortunate access to a lot of different systems of growing and systems of processing all sorts of agronomic and horticultural crops.
So after cannabis was legal in Arkansas is when you first came back to the state. Certainly the hemp and CBD industry is where you first started working several years ago with Pure Pharma Labs. Your interest in the hemp side of things, I think we both view things, we've talked a little bit here at cannabis as cannabis, whether it's hemp or THC cannabis, it's much more of a legal designation than a practical one from our point of view. But you initially went into the CBD and hemp business, and extraction is a very important part of your particular business as far as what you're doing. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you got into the hemp side of things, how Pure Pharma Labs started?
So once it was legitimate and there was some consensus among lawyers and folks that could defend the position for interstate traffic, and there were a few test cases like the infamous one in Oklahoma of transporting cannabis under any designation across state lines was still a terrifying proposition to base a business on. And we put in an order on some very modern, very precision technology to do our CO2 extraction, and the manufacturing lead time on that is, minimum 6 to 9 months. It became, almost a year and a half once it was so wildly popular and profitable. But we wanted to, as you referenced, Doc, obscure some of these artificial categorical constructs about cannabis. I mean, it's a plant, it's one plant, and the more people realize that, I think the easier the truth will reveal itself to us, and we'll be able to get away from some of the misperceptions and misconceptions that have been associated with the plant. I think are only going to be gone once we normalize and legitimize its use.
Well, yeah, certainly the stigmas that cannabis carries with it are really interfere with a lot of people pursuing a very, very useful form of treatment. And that's one of the things, I think, after the 2018 Farm Bill was passed and CBD products were essentially legalized across the United States. I think in a lot of ways that was when the perception of cannabis as just not being a substance people use to become intoxicated and get high, but actually showing more medical value. One of the areas I think a lot of companies were able to move in on was exploiting the benefits of CBD, looking at when the Farm Bill was passed. And certainly, Chris, I think in the case of Pure Pharma Labs, the techniques that you have developed and are using currently to do your CBD extraction are involved in producing superior products a lot of times. I know the CO2 extraction technique you use, in a lot of ways you can preserve a lot of the terpene fraction of the cannabis plant that you're processing. Would you like to describe a little bit, get a little bit into the weeds here on how the CO2 extraction process works?
My interest in CO2 extraction comes from the early experimental days of hydrocarbon extraction, where we used to do it open loop, where it was very, very dangerous. And then the first closed loop hydrocarbon extractions that I did, I didn't believe that it was possible to get a full solvent removal and have, solventless product. And then as I learned more about CO2 and its bigger commercial enterprise applications, primarily in decaffeinating coffee beans, I started noticing that the grade of CO2 that's used for extraction is above food grade, and that it actively and it passively off gases. So I thought that from a consumer preference, there was much more of a future in cannabis products that had gone through a non-toxic, gentle, more gentle process than where some of the industry was going with the more explosive and the more dangerous hydrocarbon methods.
Yeah, the butane is often used, propane, other more of the explosive hydrocarbons are the typical way many of the cannabis products that are produced as far as ancillary products, whether they're tinctures or vape cartridges or concentrates for use by inhalation. Many of them were initially produced using the solvents like butane, propane, and many of them still are today.
Hexane, heptane. And not to disparage hydrocarbon extraction, I think it has its place. I think that there are going to be niches in the market, boutique niches for people who are really specific about what they want that can only be met with that level of extraction.
So in the production, as far as the CBD products you're producing right now, the tinctures, for instance, you go through a process typically with your CO2 extractor where you take off, I understand it, you set the temperature and pressure parameters to pull the terpene fraction off initially. Kind of go through that process for everybody.
Well, the terpenoids are a little more fragile flavonoids than the cannabinoids, and so we expose them to a lower pressure for a shorter amount of time and are able to pull them prior to decarboxylation or decarbing, through which most terpenoids don't last. There are terpenoid collection methods where, as the cannabis is heated for decarb, the volatilization of the terps are gathered and reclaimed. We think extraction's preferable, and so we do a single pass fractional distillate of just terpenes before any of the cannabis is decarbed and submitted to the pressures and the temperatures that pull the oil.
So you find the whole technique of separating the terpenes off first before reintroducing in with the cannabinoids, you maintain a higher percentage and a wider range of terpenes? Is that what you're typically seeing?
Yes, both in concentration and in presence or absence. The lab results are showing that this method is preferable for persistence. They're just, on a molecular level, I guess it gets down to polarity, but they're just not polarized to get through all of the time and solvent exposure that the oils require. So it just makes sense for us to divert them. They oxidize very quickly and they photodegrade very quickly. So as soon as we harvest the terpenes, we measure and weigh and observe, record, but then they go into the fridge in amber glass or some light prevention, just to preserve quality.
So it really, when we're looking at doing extracts of the cannabis plant, again, Chris, we've talked about this before, we're both very much the whole plant guys, that it is the entirety that's contained within the plant that really offer the medical benefits that we do see with patients. Certainly, when we do an extract, you're never going to get everything, but in my opinion, and I'm sure yours too, Chris, it seems like we're approximating much more closely in an extract what is present in the whole plant by going through this extraction process you just described.
I struggle with the fact that in the plant these molecules exist as phytocannabinoids in their geometry for a purpose. And I believe that within our bodies, in our nervous system, in the endocannabinoid system, there are microtopographical and textural nuances that appreciate the molecular shape in the plant, and connecting them with this little differentiation is my goal. I would like to get the very delicate and fragile things as they exist in the plant into a form that people can then ingest and metabolize, which is why, even though we've got the capacity here to take any flavonoid, any cannabinoid, all the way to isolate, we're just whole flower people. I mean, I think there's magic in it.
As far as talking about whole plant extracts, certainly we talk a lot here about the different cannabinoids that may be present, the entire set of terpenes that have a wide range of health and physiological properties in human beings. But Chris, you kind of mentioned flavonoids a little bit. I have a tendency to throw flavonoids in with a class of chemicals present in the whole plant. Good humors, the 100+ chemicals we haven't even analyzed in the plant yet. It's been my experience using cannabis and cannabinoids in patients that there's probably some of these good humors that we really can't account for, and it is by patients consuming that through the whole plant, or as close as we can get to the whole plant, that they really appreciate all the benefits that we see.
I agree, and think that one of the most exciting things on the frontier here with cannabis are all the yet to be identified and isolated and researched and understood.
Chris, I understand Pure Pharma Labs, you guys have just been awarded one of the processor licenses for the state of Arkansas. This, of course, allows you guys to expand into processing THC-containing flower. Again, it's all the same to us, but legally, all of a sudden, they are entitled to process THC-containing flower into non-smokable forms of cannabis. How is this going to change what Pure Pharma Labs will be producing in the future from just the really nice whole spectrum CBD products you're doing now? What can we expect to see from Pure Pharma Labs in the future?
Well, the idea in pursuing a medical cannabis license was in response to underserved patients that wanted what they perceived to be the benefits of cannabinoids, but weren't keen on pulmonary methods of delivery like vaping and smoking. And so is a pretty full line of topicals, from cosmetics all the way to acute pain creams. Not that THC is known for helping with acute pain, but the inflammation of the anti-inflammatory properties of the other cannabinoids often help for after exercise injuries for sport and just the daily wear and tear of getting older. So we're not opposed to any method of delivery. We've just decided to try to make some things that aren't abundantly available right now, and maybe introduce and expand some of the options.
Well, certainly, initially the cultivators are concentrating on flower production and the usual ancillary products. So there does seem to be an area of opening in, particularly on perhaps the tincture. I'm a big tincture guy, as most people know. The tincture side is perhaps making higher percentages of CBD relative to the THC that is present. Perhaps some mixes that a smaller company like you guys will be able to produce additional lines of product that the cultivators really don't have the ability to produce for specific patient population. Well, I got to say, we very much look forward to seeing the new products Pure Pharma Labs will be producing as far as the processing side of things. Of course, the CBD, CBG, minor cannabinoid side of things, I'm sure you're going to continue to pursue Pure Pharma's, I'm sure, right?
I'm a whole flower zealot.
Very good.
I think that the value of THC metabolically is really only in the presence of its fellow cannabinoids, and in spite of its monetary value as a primary source, I don't think it's the most important cannabinoid. I think that it's an adapter molecule that allows our autoimmune system and our nervous systems and all of our metabolic systems to self-regulate and function at a higher level. And I think that anything I can do to help connect people to a quality source of this is really my life's work.
Well, it sounds like, Chris, you're an entourage effect guy. Oh, well, I like this guy because of that, of course, because, all of us here at Cannabis Expert MD, we're big believers in the entourage effect. For more information on all things medical cannabis, be sure to check us out at CannabisExpertMD.com. We're also available on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Cannabis Expert MD. Thanks again, Chris.
Sure, it's my pleasure.